one thing that comes through. We are not alone in this universe. It's a thought that rings true. Ancient cave dwellers drew spacecraft on the walls. It's a recurring theme. I've seen the same thing while walking late at night, and I know it's not a dream.
From Maelstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance in the sea.
If you tell the truth, they will ridicule everything you say and do. It's all part of a deception. It's a puppet master's tool. And I've seen those craft shut down the silos from 10 miles away. And there ain't nothing that the Pentagon can do. They can't make them go away.
From Maelstrom to Manhattan, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance in the sea. From Maelstrom to Manhattan, New York to LA, you can't get the picture if they're pale or they're gray. But what we have seen might not be what it seems when the government's shadows dance in the sea.
Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. And thank you.
You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, with our host, Gary Anderson.
And that is me. Well, I had to switch out the mic during the break there. I don't know if that's any difference here. Hey, James, are you still there?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
I am doing good. And how about you, Sam? Are you still there?
I am still here.
Yeah, well, I just didn't like the sound of that new mic I got. To me, it was a little bit too bassy, but now I hopefully I'm sounding better.
Did you just switch it over? Or?
I sure did. I did that during the break. I'm fast.
Yeah, well, you're sounding pretty good now.
Well, thank you. Anyway, it is scary about all the things that's happening out there. Like, again, the irradiated, with the women, the Navajo women and their babies coming down with cancer. I'm really concerned again about, Japan dumping all this radiated water. The more I was thinking about it during the break, it's going to not just cause problems for Japan, it's going to cause problems worldwide, and it's going to cause some major problems in Oregon, Washington, and California, for the fishing industry. I mean, it's going to do some major damage to us, and I don't think we can afford that type of hit.
I'm worried about this, Gary. I'm worried about the fact that was just one plant that had a disaster with the floods that created the situation back in 2011 in the first place. I'm getting kind of an echo myself for some reason.
Well, did the echo go away? Because I cranked your volume up because you were really quiet.
All right. I can ignore it as long as you're not hearing it. But think about all the power plants that we got across the country in different parts of the world. I think we're up to close to 130 in the United States that are actively working. So you kind of imagine if one nuclear plant can create that much damage, what would happen if all of them had issues?
Well, that's a
It's
scary.
game over.
It is.
Game over.
So, Mike, the question is, what are they doing with all these power plants with the irradiated water? They use it to cool it down, correct? And then it becomes irradiated. So they store it. I mean, aren't they going to run out of places eventually to store it?
Well, I think the idea is the water that cools it isn't necessarily radiated, but the problem is when they leak. And so the cooling's dependent. I mean, you've got to cool, even if you shut down a nuclear reactor, it's still got to go through a shutdown procedure. You still got to cool down the rods, the spent fuel rods as well. And that requires electricity. It requires the ability to pump. It's mainly the pumps that pump in fresh water. And they got the holding ponds, for the heated up water. So they have a way of recycling the water through through these ponds and back into the system. The problem comes into play. What happens if we ever had an EMP event where you had no electricity to run the pumps? See, that's the issue.
Oh, don't worry about it. The government says don't worry about it. They got a 5 to 7 day supply of diesel. Hey, you don't have nothing to worry
what
about.
Happens? How are they going to get the fuel to the nuclear plants if the vehicles can't run to bring the fuel there in the first place?
Well, like I said,
it's like a ticking time bomb.
Oh, you have nothing to worry about it for the first 5 or 7 days. Then you got something to worry about.
Yes. Nobody talks about this stuff, do they?
No, not until it happens. And they always, you know what? It's like, it is never going to happen. Well, look what happened in Japan. Okay, they had a typhoon come in, and guess what happened? Boom. We could have a sun flare and take out part of our grid system or all of it or whatever. Then we're going to have all these reactors going crazy. And then I was reading online that some of these reactors are getting old, and actually the water that's used to cool them is getting contaminated. So, yes, some of them are producing heavy water.
Yeah, because they recycle the same water through it is eventually going to pick up either leakage or something else. The water gets radiated, and then it becomes contaminated. But this whole thing with EMP, people don't realize that there was a thing called a Carrington event that took place in the mid-1800s. And thank goodness we didn't have all the electronics and all the stuff that was available today. But it was so severe that at the time they had telegraph lines that went across the country. They all got fried.
Yeah, well...
Can you imagine?
But you're forgetting one thing. Some of the operators got fried also.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was quite a few deaths on it because, they were sitting right there at the opposite end, right? The wire come feeding right into their little, pad, and guess what?
They got electrocuted.
Yeah, they got fried.
Or whatever happened to them.
Barbecued.
Yeah, no, I knew about the damage it caused to telegraph lines. I didn't know about that part. But can you imagine if something that intense happened today? It's and what makes it worse is our whole world is dependent on electricity and by extension the internet.
Yeah.
Well, and it's all that, and then you take the internet and you take computers. Computers control the nuclear plants by and large about the cooling systems and everything. If none of those work, what happens then?
I say we're going to have some serious problems, and that's what we're leading to eventually. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's been a long break since we've had a sun flare to do any damage. And it's about time. And it's been about time for the last 30, 40 years, if you go back and track them.
Oh, yeah.
And
I'm not very comfortable about it. I mean, here in Washington State, we had, there was a time back in the 70s, and you're probably aware of this, Gary, when we had quite a number of plants that got thankfully, they didn't get fully activated. They were in construction phases. I think the one in particular I'm thinking about is SATSUP, that they built the towers and everything, the what do you call it, the stacks and everything, but they never got around to actually building the reactor itself.
That's because they ran out of money, thank God.
Yeah, and it's a good thing, too. I would not want to be near anything like that at all. But that's one of the reasons I would not want to be down in the Tri-Cities area for that very same reason.
Yeah, I just look at if we ever did have a major sun flare, it's not just we have to worry about the nuclear plants. We got to worry about the hospitals. They're going to run out of diesel for their backup generators, everything. And even if the generators even still worked, let's face it, if we got a big enough flare, the generators aren't going to work. And that's the scary part. The only thing it's going to run yet is if you have, something in a Faraday cage, or, of course, that isn't going to do you any good if you have no internet or anything. But maybe if you have an old car, the one before they had the solid state ignition, when it still had points in it and all that stuff, I've got a funny feeling that'll still run. But anything made from, let's say, the late 60s on is not going to run.
If it's got a computer in it and it has no way of protecting it like a Faraday cage like you're talking about, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm in electronics as well. So it's a cage that prevents, if you got electronic equipment in it, it prevents certain types of electromagnetic radiation from killing it. But you don't have anything like that on a car, and you'll be driving along and all of a sudden everything goes dead. That reminds me of a TV series that came out about 4, 5, 6 years ago called Revolution. Very same thing. At least in the first few episodes, it pretty much was what we're talking about right now, like a Carrington event or some kind of EMP. Everything stops working. Wherever you were driving, that's where you stop. That's where you start walking.
Oh yeah. But don't worry, because if you're figuring, I'm going to go to the ATM and pull money out, that ain't going to do you any good.
Yeah, sure.
That ain't going to do any good. The banks won't be able to do anything because you know what? The internet's down. They can't access their computers because they're down. So forget about getting money. The whole banking system will die real quick. The satellites are going to be fried. So, even if that, let's face it, everything is going to come to a standstill. So you're going to go back into the 40s really fast.
Yeah, those plastic cards you got in your wallet aren't going to do you any good either.
No. Yeah,
nothing will work.
Nothing.
You're going to go back to a barter system in a hurry. And if you don't have something other than paper money or plastic cards to barter with, and that will be pretty much useless, then you're going to be in bad shape. You better have something significant to barter with somebody, and that's provided we're not radiated by all the nuclear plants are and being cooled.
Yeah, it's nothing to worry about. Now, I don't even think paper money will be very good at a certain point because you know what will happen? They'll want gold, they'll want silver, or they'll want food, or they'll want something. Okay, that is what's going to be worth a lot.
Oh, yeah. People's values will change in a hurry, won't they?
Oh, yeah. Of course, I've been told by a few experts that, the grid system won't go down all across the country. Maybe only part of the country will go down. That's still enough because, look, if that only part of the country goes down and we lose a lot of satellites, for example, we're still screwed.
Well, I hear in California that they're shutting the power off on certain days, and because of I guess the reasoning is that the fire potential is pretty bad in Northern California, so they're cutting the power to a large sections of communities. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Oh, yeah. It was on the news today.